My name is Claire and welcome to today's session of Power Hour. Thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us for today's presentation on counter frauds by Soleil and Emma. Before I hand you over, I'd like to go through some housekeeping points. This session is being recorded. The recording and slides will be shared after the session. The recording will be shared on YouTube Power Hour Library, where you can also find recordings of previous Power Hour events. If you have any questions, please use the chat box. And if you see any questions that you really like, use the thumbs up icon to upvote it. And we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. We can only answer questions about this specific event. And please do not name any trusts. If you do have specific questions sensitive to your trust, please use the customer help portal and we'll pop that into the link. Pop that link into the chat. Right, next slide, please. Now we have a request where we'd like your help. Since September 2024, we have been uploading each quarter unsuppressed pupil premium allocations to the trust area on Document Exchange. We presented about this in the Power Hour in October. Thank you for those of you who fed back initial comments to us. We'd like to make sure that this new approach is helpful to you all, so we'd be grateful if you could click on the link below and complete a short survey. I will give you a couple of moments now, please, to do that. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you for that. We really appreciate you filling in the form for us. Now we're going to get ready to hand you over to Emma to start this presentation.
Thank you, Claire. As I've been introduced, my name's Emma and I'm a counter fraud officer on the ESFA counter fraud team. So I'm just going to go through today what we're going to cover in the session. So we're going to start with an introduction to our team, look at what fraud is, the definitions and theories, look at some case studies, look at some lessons learned and fraud enablers, focus on types of fraud, red flags and fraud indicators, how to spot fraud, how to report it, and then we're going to have a you said we did slide, which will reflect back on the last Power Hour that we did and that we've taken on board some suggestions from that session. And then we're going to finish with time for some questions. Next slide, please. So I just want to start with an introduction to our team. At the ESFA counter fraud team, we strive for a zero tolerance of fraud and promote a strong anti-fraud culture. Our aim is to protect and ensure that every pound spent on education and skills has the greatest possible impact on ensuring all learners can realise their potential. Our vision is to lead and support a better understanding of fraud through preventing, detecting, deterring, measuring and responding to fraud committed against us. And we want to increase our work with the sector and proactively support academies to combat the risk of fraud. Prevent, detect, deter are the pillars of effective counter fraud, with the foundation being to protect the public purse, ESFA assets, and the education sector. Our mission is to be an excellent counter-fraud function, and through our counter-fraud measures in 2023 to 24, we prevented 56 million and detected 35 million pound of fraud and error. Next slide, please. So I wanted to start the session looking at a quick look at some definitions. So when we're talking about fraud, what do we mean? So fraud is defined as a dishonest act which is committed with the intention of making a gain or causing a loss or risk of a loss to another. So this includes fraud by false representation, fraud by wrongfully failing to disclose information, and fraud by abuse of position. We also usually use the term fraud and error, as it is not always possible to know the intent behind the act to prove fraud, so error would cover these instances. And the Public Sector Fraud Authority, or the PSFA, defines error in the context of public sector fraud as associated losses that occur without fraudulent intent. So this includes mistakes or inaccuracies in financial transactions, reporting or other admin processes that do result in a financial loss. When we look at bribery, we look at giving, offering or accepting a financial or other advantage to encourage improper performance. When we speak about corruption, we look at dishonestly undertaking an act by a person in a position of authority to acquire illicit benefits or abuse of a power for personal gain. And we're going to speak about prevention a lot today. And when we talk about prevention, we're talking about anticipating fraud and errors and putting in measures and controls that prevent or minimise fraud or error occurring in the first instance. Next slide, please. So I want to start by looking at the fraud triangle and the fraud diamond when we're looking at fraud theories. So the most common used one is the fraud triangle that was developed by Cressy in 1953. And then the fraud diamond was developed by Wolf and Hermansen in 2004. And this adds in a fourth point of capability, turning the triangle into a diamond. So both models look at the following factors required to be able to commit fraud. So we need incentive or pressure. So this is often financial, such as living beyond one's means. We have the opportunity. This could be weaknesses in the organisation that can be exploited. So is one person responsible for all financial transactions with no independent checks? We have rationalisation, and this is the justification for committing fraud. So someone may have felt that they were passed over for a promotion or a pay rise, but feel they do deserve the extra money. So they will obtain that through fraud for the work they're doing, and that is their rationalisation for the act. And as I previously said, the diamond also has the fourth factor of capability. So this is being able to execute the fraud. So this could be the position of the fraudster or personality traits like being able to lie effectively. Next slide, please. And the second theory I wanted to mention is the 10-80-10 fraud theory. So this is widely recognised, but it's not attributed to one source. So this looks at that 10% of people will never commit fraud. 80% of people could go either way, depending on the circumstances at any given time. And 10% of people will always commit fraud, given the opportunity. So I think that's one to think about. Do the numbers shock you? Do they surprise you? Would you have picked them figures when thinking about their behaviours? Next slide, please. So moving on to case studies. There's two case studies that I wish to talk about today, which they're both concluded investigations carried out by our investigation colleagues. And the first case study I want to talk about relates to a single academy trust. And the allegations were made regarding financial irregularities in 4 condition improvement funding projects, including a failure to return a £360,000 surplus to the DfE and misuse of those funds. The investigation found that there was a breach of the Official Journal of the European Union regulations, the Academies Financial Handbook, and the Trust's own internal policies. And that was done by directly awarding project management of the projects to a single company without competitive tendering. The Trust also overclaimed and received about 1.5 million. And this included £269,000 for boiler and heating works, 1.2 million for replacement of timber mobiles in a defective condition, and this was misrepresented in the bid, and £28,000 for life, safety and statutory compliance works. And in this case, the Trust failed to submit scope changes requests for DfE approval. They submitted false completion certificates whilst work remained incomplete or out of scope. They relied on third-party project management companies for critical decisions without proper oversight, as required by the Academy's Financial Handbook. And they deliberately used surplus funds for purposes beyond the approval project scope, despite awareness funds should have been returned. So as a result of this investigation, the Trust admitted errors and acknowledged responsibility for non-compliance. The accounting officer and several trustees resigned, and the Trust were issued with a notice to improve, and it was rebrokered into a multi-academy trust. Next slide, please. So the second case study involves a multi-academy trust and lack of financial management and irregular payments to the CEO. Over £400,000 worth of contentious spending was found, including a £38,000 car allowance, despite no evidence that a car had been leased, a £3,000 a year healthcare package. The investigators looking at the case found the former CEO's salary and working hours were increased from 2.5 days to 4, and then to 5 without formal board approval. And while receiving a salary for 4 days a week, the CEO's company received payment for an additional day of consultancy, which was not formally approved by the board. So as a result of this investigation, the chair resigned and the schools were rebrokered. Next slide, please. So moving on, I want to speak to you today about our lessons learned and fraud enablers. So in line with government functional standards, we look at lessons learned from investigation cases, like the ones I've just spoke about. And within this, we consider fraud enablers and fraudster personas. Fraudster personas have been developed by the Commonwealth Fraud Prevention Centre and are informed by case studies. And they can help us be more aware of the common methods used by fraudsters by putting us in the mindset of a fraudster. And case studies reveal that those who commit fraud tend to use common tried and tested methods time and time again. The Commonwealth Fraud Prevention Centre does have further information on their website around these fraud personas, should you wish to visit this. And it does have a really useful guide on the practical use of the personas that you can have a look at in your own time. So on the screen, there's 8 fraud personas as created by the Commonwealth Fraud Prevention Centre. And these are the personas that believe that who will try and defraud you, and it looks at how they will do it. So fraudsters can often use a variety of methods from several different personas. For example, they may take on the persona of the deceiver. And in this case, they will look at the deceiver will look at making others believe something that is not true to dishonestly gain personal benefit. They can become an impersonator and impersonate other individuals. The impersonator pretends they're another person or entity to dishonestly gain personal benefits. They can become a fabricator and fabricate evidence. And the fabricator will invent or produce something that is false, again, to dishonestly gain a personal benefit. And then finally, they could become a concealer and conceal their activity. They hide their actions from being seen or known, about to dishonestly make a gain. And they're just some of the personas that a fraudster may take on. But as I say, you can look on the website and have a look at the other characteristics from the other personas. Next slide, please. So I'm continuing on our lessons learned. In February 2024, we completed a review of over 60 investigation cases from the previous 2 years. And the initial review identified 3 common enablers of fraud across all areas. So the first was the intention of process or control measure circumvented. The second, the interpretation of policy or funding rules challenged. And the third is lack of oversight. And looking into pre-16 cases in more detail, following the initial 3 fraud enablers identified in the Q1 review, a further review found a 4th enabler of fraud, and this is true of cases in which the school or multi-academy trust has been the victim of fraud. The 4th enabler looked at internal control and governance failure and appeared in 27% of cases. In these cases, internal controls and governance fail to prevent the loss, and we'll look at how to improve these further along in the session. So we found that self-reported cases continue to be how the majority of fraud and error is identified in schools and multi-academy trusts. And this is one of the factors that has informed the key messages we want to take to the sector in our counter-fraud communications plan. So looking back at the case studies that I've just spoke about, they do highlight how internal governance failure can lead to fraud and bad actors being able to succeed. And this may be due to their position, as demonstrated in the fraud diamond. And as I highlighted at the start, our aim is to ensure every pound spent has the greatest impact and can be done through our vision of leading and supporting a better understanding of fraud. So I'm going to pass over now to Soleil, who will expand a bit more on how we can do this. Thank you. And next slide, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to Emma, and just to introduce myself as well, as mentioned, my name is Soleil. I'm also a senior counter-fraud officer within the counter-fraud team in the ESFA. So I'm just going to talk at the moment, firstly, about types of fraud. We'll look at those types and how to identify concerns as well. So next slide, please. So firstly, we'll be looking at mandate fraud. So this is also known as payment diversion fraud. It's typically targeted at businesses or customers or contractors who are being contacted by email purporting to be a company or individual that they've been working with or making payments to. It usually involves a request for payment or change in bank details. Fake emails are often involved as well and created to appear very similar to genuine email addresses. It can often accompany the fake invoices as well. And then as a result, payments are made to the diverted bank account and the intended recipient is at a loss. And then just as a step from the mandate fraud, we have CEO fraud, so the chief executive officer. So similar to mandate fraud, this could be that someone has tried to impersonate a chief executive or a head teacher in the sense of a school, or even other members of staff within the academy, which could include finance staff or administrators as well. Requests can be made for information or to persuade staff to make urgent payments or transfers. Employees can often feel compelled to make the payment, believing that this is a senior manager, and do not want to or think to challenge or verify this. It's important to remember that even an apparently genuine email address may have been hacked, and that they can apply pressure, implying urgency as a means of persuading you to bypass controls around payments. Organised criminals may also request you to change bank details in advance and wait to submit invoices, hoping that fewer checks will be performed if the bank details are not changed at the same time. So it is worth bearing in mind it is possible that the bank details had been received, could even have been 6 months prior. And then when an invoice is received, they just hope that because there's no recent change of bank details, people don't question that. And that's how they can sometimes slip through the system. And I won't go into too much detail on it at the moment, but AI is obviously one of those advancing threats, and things such as deep fakes and voice cloning are also part of this now as well. So it's really important, even if you have a telephone call with somebody, question if that sounds like something that you would be expecting. And additionally, changes to contact details and bank details should try to be verified separately from the method which they are received. So if you received an email with details, you should try and contact them, for example, on a telephone number that you know does belong to them. And just as a question to think about, would your chief executive officer or head teacher complain if you spoke to them directly to confirm a request that is purporting to be from them before making a change or a payment? Usually they would prefer that you've made that check rather than paid out an invoice or something that turned out to be fraudulent. Next slide, please. So now I'll talk a little bit more about payment fraud. Payment fraud encompasses different methods, and it includes creating false records and bank accounts so that fraudulent payments can be created. There is intercepting and altering pay details and amounts on checks and payable orders and then attempting to cash them. Processing false claims for grants or repayments. Self-authorizing payments for their own account or working with others, and duplicate funding. And then with regards to invoice fraud, an invoice might say that it is due on a particular date for the payment has been received, or threaten that non-payment will have a negative impact, or they may apply other pressure tactics to force you to try and pay this invoice. It can also be for goods that haven't been ordered and received, or potentially just an inflated amount for a genuine order that has been made as well. Next slide, please. So, procurement fraud. Procurement fraud relates to a company purchasing goods, services, or commissioning construction projects from third parties. Bid rigging is also a form of procurement fraud when suppliers agree to limit competition in the procurement process, which denies the customer a fair price. Bid rigging agreements can take several forms, such as bid rotation, where firms agree to take it in turns to submit the lowest bid; bid suppression, where one of the firms agrees not to bid or to withdraw their bids; and cover pricing, which is where a bidder agrees for one or more of them to submit an artificially high bid, which distorts the procurer's impression of the competitive price. And this is a risk for education providers who have suppliers for various different requirements, which can also include construction projects at quite a high value as well. And if you do want more information on that, you can also find that on the gov.uk website or through the Competition and Markets Authority as well. They have a lot of information about that. And then novel, contentious or repercussive transactions. Sometimes these are abbreviated to NCR, just in case that comes up. So novel transactions are those which the Academy Trust has no experience or are outside its normal range of business. Contentious transactions are those which may cause criticism of the Trust by Parliament, the public or the media. And repercussive transactions are those likely to cause pressure on other trusts to take a similar approach and hence have wider financial implications. This was highlighted in case study 2 that Emma spoke about, and guidance is set out in the Academy Trust Handbook. So please consider those guidance that is available to you if you're making any of the unusual transactions. There are several different types of frauds and scams, and we can't cover all of the scenarios here today, obviously. But for more information, we have the Action Fraud logo there. You can go on the Action Fraud website. They have an A to Z page, and they provide an explanation of different types of frauds. And it's really worth having a look at this if you have a few spare minutes as well. Next slide, please. So now I'll talk a little bit about red flag indicators of fraud. So this will hopefully just help you maybe identify some potential concerns. So what do we mean by a red flag? So typically red flags are behaviours or actions that might be perceived as a concern or a warning sign of the fraudster's wrongdoing. So notice that the words perceived and warning signs, it doesn't necessarily mean it is fraud. They are just perceptions and warnings. They may be from staff within your own academy or trust, so it could be insider fraud, or it could be from partners, contractors or suppliers, for example. So we'll just talk about a few of these which I've highlighted in the slide. So we have behavioural indicators. The key indicators here could be that there are signs of someone living beyond their means, a change in their usual schedule. So, for example, that could be that they start early, they start staying later, they refuse to take time off. They might be unwilling to delegate or share tasks, or they may have developed unusual vendor relationships or just become withdrawn at work or within social activities as well. For documentation red flags, this could be that documents have been missing or noticed that they've been altered. It could be inadequate record keeping or inconsistencies in records, accounts and files. Someone could be covering up wrongdoing, and that tends to be where you see documentational red flags. Next, we have financial and transactional red flags. So these can be discrepancies in accounting records, unusual bank activity, inventory shrinkage, or duplicate payments and invoices. And we have organisational red flags. So this could be changes that affect the organisation as a whole. This could be that they've become into financial difficulty, a sudden increase in spending, lack of transparency during a process, changing conditions, which could include regulation changes, economy changes, or management changes, which we all know that they do happen quite regularly. It could have a lack of audit trails, or they could be using the same supplier over and over despite rising costs, and that kind of links back to the bid rigging that I mentioned previously. And then finally, we have personal red flags. So this might be that someone has a grievance with the company, they feel underpaid or undervalued, they feel that they are owed something, they might have a conflict of interest, or this also ties into related party transactions as well. And like I said, this is not an exhaustive list. There are lots of indications that someone could be committing fraud out there, but also remember that these don't confirm that fraud has taken place. It could be a sign that there's other struggles, and it's always worth just considering that as well when you think about these. Next slide, please. So now we'll talk a little bit about tactics and signs. So what is it that you can sort of look out for that you might be being subject to fraud? So first of all, authority and trust. So fraudsters can impersonate people or official companies that the victim would ordinarily trust or believe is official, and it can include using the logos. So just be wary if you see something, if logos don't look right, or if something looks different to what it usually is, just bear that in mind. Next, we have urgency. So they can apply pressure tactics and apply these to say that something is urgent. They might say that the deadline's passed, or it's coming up, it's a limited time offer, or that negative consequences would happen, such as a fine if you don't action it. Then we have timeliness. Fraudsters can use events or specific times of the year to target victims. This, for example, could include knowing when returns are due, and it's used to appear as a genuine request. Then we have emotion, and this is obviously quite a difficult one for people, but they do use tactics to appeal to emotions. They could try and appeal for guilt, fear, hope, or empathy. We've got building relationships. Someone could try and build a relationship with you to gain information from you, and it's another way that a bad actor will try and gain your trust before asking for sensitive information or payments. They may ask a lot of questions, or ask questions about someone as well, just regarding different aspects of your life to gain that information. Next, we have scarcity. So being offered something that is in short supply or not widely available, such as tickets to a concert, is sort of a generic example of this, but it's usually one of those things, if it sounds too good to be true, it often is. And technical knowledge is the final one we have here. So bad actors can try to confuse you with apparent technical knowledge or jargon. And sometimes we naturally take advice from someone that we perceive knows more than us, and therefore inclined to do as they ask. But sometimes it's just worth taking that moment and take a step back and think, is that something? The logo on this page is from a campaign called Take 5 to Stop Fraud. And the key message behind that is take 5 minutes. Does it seem right? Does it feel right? And just always bear these things in mind. Next slide, please. So now I'll talk a little bit about how to spot fraud. And again, this I've tied in with Stop and Think, which is a government campaign. Firstly, it's one of the best things we can say is don't take information at face value. Stop and think whether the call or email is genuine. Have you had previous contact with this person or company? And does it appear to be the same contact details and style? Has anything changed about how they've contacted you? Is the wording different to how you would normally expect to receive information from them? Don't be rushed into a decision. If you receive a call, you can hang up. You don't have to worry about being polite and staying on a call if you don't believe it to be genuine. And don't dial a number that they provide you with. Numbers can be spoofed to look like a genuine number. Try and call from a different number if you can, because a line can be held open, which makes you think that you're dialing out to a different number when actually the fraudster is still on the other end of the call. And a genuine company or bank would likely not take offence if you say that you want to go away and do checks and call them back, whereas a fraudster is more likely to pressure you to act in that moment. If you need to speak to your bank's fraud team, you can also dial 159, and this will get you through to your bank's appropriate fraud team. We also suggest that you check contact details via reliable sources on official websites or on a genuine bill or invoice that you know you've had, and contact the company via these methods. Open source information is also quite useful in these types of circumstances, and this could be information such as company's house. You can use this to check registration numbers, but it is worth bearing in mind that these can also be spoofed, so you do need to be careful if you see these on invoices. You can't always necessarily assume that the information on an invoice is the genuine number that you will find. And the same applies for the UK VAT number checker as well. It's also worth just using your search engine to check addresses. Sometimes if you type it in, you'll be able to check details there. And if you have experienced colleagues around you, it's often worth just having that moment to speak to them if you have any concerns, as long as you're not concerned that they have any implication in the fraud, which is often unlikely, but it's always worth bearing in mind. Additionally, avoid any unknown links and emails. Be really wary of any emails that you get that you're not expecting, that have links expecting you to follow, especially if it's asking for payments as well. And then finally on this slide, check for spelling and grammar mistakes. So it could be, as I say, spelling or grammar, but it could also be font changes, an unusual email address, or that the design or logos look different than you expect. And I think a key bit just to add to this, it's worth noting that with the rise in AI, they are changing, and the landscape is different now. The spelling and grammar mistakes are not as prevalent as they used to be once over, because that's being put in place that the fraudsters use. It does tend to cut those out, but it is still worth checking. Just make sure that there's anything there that doesn't look right to you. Next slide, please. So what can you do to prevent fraud? So we've compiled a list of sort of tips that we think are the best way to prevent fraud. So to begin with, segregation of duties. So multiple aspects of a transaction require more than one person to authorise the transaction, to prevent one person being able to raise, approve and pay in a purchase to pay system. And if, for example, you're a very small trust or don't have a very large team around you, it might be difficult, or you might be unable to completely segregate duties. But in that case, ensure that all the steps are auditable. Then we have improving monitoring, reporting and auditing processes. You should have a good governance structure in place with defined lines of authority and reporting responsibilities. Next, we have robust IT controls. So weak IT controls and insufficient security measures for information systems can create a fraud risk. And then tone from the top. So what we mean by that is you want the high-level management to be demonstrating counter-fraud culture and encourage staff to also have that culture as well. You really want the buy-in from the people at the top of the trust as well. Due diligence. So particularly when recruiting new employees or when dealing with new businesses as well, just conduct some due diligence checks about who you are dealing with. You should have policies in place and communicate accountability and best practices of these. So this could be policies for IT system access, a counter-fraud policy or procedures, and failing to regularly review and update policies and procedures and communicate these to staff can create or raise a risk of fraud as well. Next, we have management of risks and the likelihood of occurrence. Ongoing monitoring of controls which are in place and taking any corrective actions if needed. Physical security. So all of those physical assets and items, we really want to make sure we've got control of those. So it could be the actual building itself, assets, records, computers, data files, and even petty cash as well. Accounting systems. So you need an effective method for identifying and recording transactions. If the system has issues with not tracking time periods during which transactions occur, insufficient descriptions of transactions, or no adequate procedure to prevent duplicate payments, it increases the fraud risk. Regular staff training as well is also really important. This should be on the relevant procedures of anything really, but particularly counter-fraud, bribery and corruption. You should have appropriate levels of qualifications, experience or competence for employees. Organisations should also have personal performance appraisal measures or practices. This can help track an employee's performance and also make them feel really valued as well. And it would also highlight if there's any concerns there in areas where they do need further training, which would help tighten those controls. And then finally, we have whistleblowing. So you are a whistleblower if you're a worker and you report certain types of wrongdoing. And the wrongdoing you disclose must be in the public interest, meaning it must affect others, which typically could be the general public as well. And as a whistleblower, you're protected by law, but there are some exceptions. There's details in the Public Interest Disclosure Act of 1998, but you can find more information on whistleblowing on the gov.uk website, and we also have a page regarding whistleblowing into the ESFA, which will also be DFE as well. Next slide, please. So how can you report fraud to us? So just to make a point that fraud obviously takes away taxpayers' money, which should be used in the education sector. And we all know that's where we want to spend it. We don't want it going into a fraudster's pocket. So by reporting concerns of fraud to us, we may be able to launch an investigation, take appropriate action, and seek to recover lost money. Our gov.uk page on how to report fraud or financial irregularity gives further information on what to report, what not to report, and what will happen after making your report. There are also details on the whistleblowing procedure that I've mentioned and an option to sign up for our ESFA fraud news and alerts. The QR code on this screen will take you to the sign up page for the alert system. We anticipate that we'll be starting to use this imminently for fraud alerts that may be relevant and that you would need to be aware of. They'll be issued on an ad hoc basis initially when threats arise. So please do consider signing up for this so we can provide you with these alerts. Next slide, please. So we're going to watch a short video just now, which does show you how to report the how to go to the gov.uk page, which gives you details of the registration form for the alert system as well, if you weren't able to scan the QR code on the previous page.
Do you know how to report a suspicion of fraud to the ESFA? On the gov.uk webpage, type Report Fraud to ESFA in the search bar and click the spyglass to search. The first link to come up should be Report Fraud or Financial Irregularity to ESFA. Click this link and it will take you directly to the new web page to report fraud. First is the list of contents of the page. If you know the information you want, you can click on any of the links here to take you straight to that section. The contents give information on make a report, what to report, after making a report, information on whistleblowing, and how you can sign up to receive fraud news and alerts. The first section is Make a Report. Here you will find the email address of where to send your report and details of the information you should send that will help us look into your report. Please send as much information as you can. Please include your contact details in case we require further information, the name of the school, academy, college or training provider your report concerns, the names of any of the people involved, information on what has happened and when it happened, any value of funds, if known, that have been lost, if any measures have been taken to prevent it happening again, if the matter has been reported to the police, whether the loss has been offset by any insurance arrangement, and of course, any other information you feel may be relevant and will help with our investigation. What to report? Please tell us about any knowledge you have or suspicions that an academy, school, college or training provider has claimed funding through deception, broken any of the funding rules, or has failed to deliver the education or training they should be delivering. There is also a list of indicators or potential red flags to look out for that may indicate when something isn't right. There is also information on what not to report to us and where you should go if you have other concerns. After you have made your report, we will confirm we have received it and may contact you for further information. Why make a report? Fraud is now the biggest reported crime in the UK and takes away valuable funds that should be being used for our schools and education. By making a report, we will be able to launch an investigation, take any appropriate action, and recover lost funds and return them back into the education sector. Please click the link to find out more on how you can help protect your organisation against fraud. Do you know about whistleblowing? As an employee, you may be protected as a whistleblower if you make a report. There is information here on what that means, how we will handle your report as a whistleblower, and how to make a report in this way. Lastly, we are setting up a service to provide you with the latest fraud news and alerts on emerging fraud threats. You can click on the link to sign up for the service. Simply enter your name, organisation, business email address, and please let us know if there are any specific fraud-related issues you would like information on, and we will add you to our mailing list. The alerts will be sent through the gov.uk Notify service, and you can unsubscribe at any time.
Great, thank you. And next slide, please. So just one final slide we have here. So this is a You Said We Did slide. So this slide was taken from our last Power Hour that we spoke at, and we wanted to revisit it. So the first point here is that we would lead comms and engagement to raise awareness. We continue to do this, and most recently we have attended the Schools and Academies show in November. Next, we had said that we would provide fraud alerts and updates through the ESFA update. We have issued some notices via the ESFA update, and we are currently utilising the comms channels available to us and hope to expand this as we move into the main department. Our alert system, as we've just mentioned, is available to register for notifications. Next, we had said we would promote our service and guidance on gov.uk, and as just shown, we do have our new gov.uk page available and has been launched successfully. And then finally, to collaborate with partners to support counter-fraud activity. And again, we're looking at the most appropriate channels we can use when we move into the Department for Education alongside our alerts. And we're developing a working relationship with cyber colleagues as well. We are also assisting on developing a best practice guide, which hopefully would be available in the near future to you. We also have a new counter-fraud sector working group, which held its first meeting yesterday, and this is with members of the Academies Finance and Assurance Steering Group. It's a subgroup of that. So in 2024-25 and then going into 25-26, we plan to continue stakeholder engagement and have opportunities to speak and attend at events. We will join up with our cybersecurity colleagues to develop a cyber fraud case study. Obviously, this Power Hour has taken place as part of that engagement. We are working with Frameworks colleagues to create the Fraud Awareness Good Practice Guide. The Counter-Fraud Working Group will continue, which has just recently launched. and we'll be continuing to support weeks such as International Fraud Awareness Week as well. And that brings an end to our section of the Power Hour, and we'll now pass over for questions and back to Claire on the further slide for some feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Soleil, and Emma. That was a very informative presentation and really interesting to hear. Now we'd love to have some feedback, as your feedback really helps us to inform these events. You can either click on the link in the chat and that will bring you through to the form. We really appreciate it if you could fill that in. You have the opportunity to let us know what you think and might like in the future sessions. So I'm just going to pause for a few moments for people to do that.
Can we just move on to the next slide, please, for the feedback form? Thank you.
Here you can click as well on the QR codes, scan that and bring you through to a form. Right, thank you for taking the time to fill out that feedback form. I'm just going to bring back Emma and Soleil now to answer some of the many questions that you have in the chat.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, just having a look at some of the questions that have come in, and our colleagues and our team seem to have answered quite a lot of them. I think there's quite a few asking around, will the presentation be available in the slides? These get uploaded to the YouTube channel. I think there's a link posted somewhere in the Q&A right at the beginning, and that you can save and refer back to. So if you do need to save them, then yeah, that's absolutely fine. You can watch this back. I think there's also a question in there regarding internal staff generated fraud attempts, and it has been answered in the chat, but if anyone else is sort of wondering about this, Sol did go through, I think it was after this question was posted, some points of what you can do to prevent fraud. But we sort of do look at best practice internally and externally, and we look at top level commitment, looking at risk assessment, proportionate risk-based prevention procedures and due diligence, communication, including training. And as we've said, we've got our alert system coming out. Hopefully that'll be more communication from ourselves out to the sector, and monitoring and reviewing. And there has been a link posted there for latest guidance under the Economic Crime and Transparency Act and on gov.uk. So if anyone is also interested in that, there's some links within that question if people want to visit them. Just having a look if there's anything else.
Yeah, I think I was just going to highlight the question we've had in terms of the change with ESFA moving into the DFE department. So I know this has been answered, and as it says, we don't expect any changes. The ESFA closure, a decision was made to bring our division into the Department for Education Fraud and Error team. I think it's been mentioned, but it's just worth highlighting. We do see it as a great opportunity, and it will further help our reach, and it'll widen our sector as well. But it'll be business as usual in terms of reporting to us and with our investigation teams as well at the moment. So it shouldn't be any change at the moment within the sector. But yeah, we do have a transition plan in place. So that's already ongoing at the moment. And as I say, it's a really great opportunity for us all.
Just having another quick look through to make sure there's nothing that's been missed. I think we've covered everything. We'll just give it a minute or so in case anyone else wants to ask any questions in there. I think we've sort of covered all the questions, unless there's anything else you want to add. We just want to say thank you for your time, and we are here to support. Anything else from you, Sol?
I don't think so. Yeah, I'm just checking these questions as well. I can't see anything that hasn't been answered. I think, yeah, just to highlight from one of the points, we did mention some of the best practice guidance, and they will be available out there as well. And yeah, it's just really great to see some lovely feedback coming through. So thank you very much for that. And we hope you found it really useful. Like I say, if there's any suggestions you have as well of things you would like, we're happy to hear those as well.
Yeah, always happy to take on board and ways we can assist. So yeah, if there's no more questions, thank you, and back over to you, Claire.
Well, thank you very much, Emma and Soleil. You obviously had covered so much, not much need for answering any questions. Thank you everyone for your attendance today and for all your questions. Hopefully that's been really beneficial and helpful to you all. Next month, the Power app presentation will be based on financial benchmarking. The date is to be confirmed. Thank you all for attending. Thank you.